Hi, Kathy Lundeen here in Sandy Haven with the BuzzKillers, where one's doing the interview and one is videoing because we're a videographer down. We're here with Sheila Harrington. She's running for the Middlesex County State Representative,
First Middlesex
District. And take it away, Sheila. Introduce yourself. Give us a little background.
Thanks. It's great to be back. I appreciate the opportunity. So yes, I am the state rep for the First Middlesex, and I'm running for re-election next month. November 3rd is the election, and I hope that people will continue to give me this privilege of doing this. I've tried. I can tell you, I've tried very hard to do what I can for the district, the different towns, and I always say it's like having 5 children or 6 children. It's like they all have a different need at a different time, and you kind of sometimes have to be working with one more than the other, but you try to be there for all of the towns. This is an interesting race because I do have an opponent, and I think you said you have interviewed
Yes,
my
we did.
opponent.
Yep.
Right.
Well, we figured new person.
Yes.
We'd give her
Great.
first.
Yep.
shot.
No, that's great.
Yep.
But it's a different experience. The last time I had a really hotly contested election was in 2010. I've had a couple of elections, but they weren't as, I think, aggressive, as this race is. So I never realized the difference of doing it when you are the state rep, because your work doesn't stop because there's a campaign.
No.
And the big item that we have to tackle when we get back is the budget.
Yep.
So right now we have an interim budget that goes until the end of October, but then we really have to get the rest of it taken care of.
And how does the budget look this year?
Well, actually, this year it is not that bad. And the reason for that is first of all, we made a commitment. We're going to level fund the cities and towns. So our schools and everything, that needs to have a budget number to get going has it. We were also able to, through federal funds and some state funds, able to increase that to cover for some of the needs for COVID and to, obviously enrollment changes and whatnot, and the new type of schooling where you have remote and you need more services, sometimes more people than you did before, ironically. So there's been a lot of additional costs, and each of the towns could apply for certain grant money to get extras. So we took care of that. We actually had to, this past summer, we had to also work on the end of last year's budget, and some of the things that we had put in the last year's budget, people hadn't completed when COVID happened, so we extended the deadline for all those prior budget items, and then tried to very specifically target special requests that we got from cities and towns on certain COVID expenses, anticipated expenses or incurred expenses.
Do you see any way that when kids have public school choice, some of that money could be going to remote parents that teach their kids remote or home, or should it just stay in the public system?
Well, the problem with it now is that the dream that we have is that eventually we will go back to the public schools, fully operational in a way that they traditionally were. The problem with that type of a model then is you would literally have to lay off teachers, which one of the biggest problems we're facing right now is the unemployment situation. So Massachusetts had actually been ranked in the nation as the lowest unemployment in the nation up until this summer.
Right.
July, we were the highest unemployment ratio in the nation. So we have the worst record now. And we went from the lowest to the highest. So I didn't know if I articulated it well.
Right. Right.
So the problem is that the way the unemployment trust is sort of worked through the years is that there's an anticipated amount of people that may go out on unemployment, and the employers pay into it, and the formula was created to cover it. The way it looks now, and what we're hearing is they're going to try to maybe put in a 60% unemployment tax increase for employers come this spring. And that is going to just cause this problem to escalate. You'll have small business owners that just say, I can't do it, and they'll cut back their employees,
Yeah.
you know, which puts us in an even worse
Yeah.
position. So I think with regard to the schools, I think the hope is they get to go back eventually, and right now we're trying to keep it stable and keep as many people employed as we can through this period of time. But I do know it's a real hardship for families too.
Yeah.
You know.
It is, the whole economic
Yeah.
thing. If you're laid off from work and you're teaching your kids at home and the
I know.
schools aren't open, you know, I think a lot
Right.
of people are like, shouldn't we get
Right.
some relief somewhere?
Well,
It's a
they
little
are. They
difficult.
are still though. Even if they're remote, they're still working with a teacher during the day, and there are teachers that are doing the remote learning. But especially if you have a younger child, I mean, they need
Yeah.
that. They need that help. I know that in the North Middlesex system, they do have room if more people want to do the hybrid model.
Yeah.
I know Groton Dunstable does not. They now have a wait list. So, and financially, they said if they were to put more people in the hybrid program, they couldn't afford it. So, it's really difficult.
It is very difficult.
Yeah.
I'm not sure people realize how difficult.
I know.
Everything really
And
is.
even in light of, I don't have the number right in front of me, so I should probably not say it, but I would say it's in excess of 800,000 that North Middlesex got to help, and they've set aside a little bit, a percentage of that for anticipated issues, but you know, it goes quickly. The extra costs of this hybrid model and remote system have been high.
That's one thing. The next thing I wanted to address was defunding the police.
Okay.
Is that an issue that would ever come before the legislature? And, you know, how do you feel about it?
Well, that defunding the police is part of the outcry that brought about the police reform bill. And in some aspect, I guess people think that is part of defunding the police. I think the term is sort of a ludicrous term, because obviously if we stopped funding our police department, we'd be living in total anarchy. So that, but there were issues in it. You know, there were things that were in that bill that I supported, things that were brought to our attention from the chiefs of police across Massachusetts, such as licensure. You know, I think you're a nurse, and your sister's a nurse, and I'm a lawyer too. And you know, keeping your license is very important. But if you really violate the rules of ethics and standards of your profession, you risk losing your license. That was never the case in law enforcement. So what they want to do now, and I agree with this, is they want to set up a division that will look at complaints of what would not be considered appropriate behavior, and in really egregious cases, you'd lose your license. And that would sort of circumvent what is now sort of a union arbitration process. And the problem is that with that arbitration process, if somebody gets cleared and goes back to work, or they could go to another town or whatever, they're able to continue moving through the process. If an independent board looks at it and says, you're losing your professional license in this, they don't have to worry that they're hiring somebody else's problem. And one chief of police that I spoke to told me a really interesting story. He had been talking to a police officer, a police chief, after the George Floyd situation, and it was someone in administration, the police department, where the George Floyd incident took place. And they said, ironically, someone else on the force had done the same thing a year ago. And the day of the George Floyd case, that person had been cleared through the union arbitration process, and they came back to work the day of the George Floyd thing. So you need something. But here's the problem. I believe that on your nurses board of review,
I used to be on that.
yeah, you have to have nurses, right?
Yeah.
Same with lawyers. You have 8 out of 12 on the board of
Yeah.
bar overseers. And the reason that's important is, as a nurse, it's like the medical tribunal for doctors. You have to have someone who is familiar with what is appropriate
Yeah,
behavior
exactly.
in that profession.
Yep.
The way the board was set up, there was a real effort to make sure no one in law enforcement could be part of it. that they said there was comments that you couldn't trust the police to discipline themselves, which I found extremely insulting. And I said the same on the House floor, that it's ridiculous. And I jokingly said, I'm a lawyer, and no profession gets more ethical jokes about that profession than lawyers do. But yet, I think our Board of Bar Associates do a good job. They review cases and they try to get rid of the bad apples. So that was something I did not feel it was just to take away someone's livelihood, unless you had, we'll use for common term, a jury of your peers. That would know whether what you did was right or wrong. And
sometimes they're the hottest ones.
Exactly.
On each other.
Exactly.
Because they want the standards to be higher.
Well, and who wants someone dragging down their own profession? Yeah. Right. So that was part of it. The other part of it was, I felt like this bill really put people in harm's way. That there was a safety concern, I thought. What they did in this is they tried to really take out the effect of the no-knock warrants. And just so that people understand, a no-knock warrant is given after a judicial review. So some judge hears evidence as to why it would be dangerous if they were to knock. That the likelihood of being killed or severe bodily harm is so great that you can't announce that you're coming in. I mean, I would liken it to, you wouldn't have wanted SEAL Team 6 to ring the doorbell. I mean, they can't. It's too dangerous. And I feel that if we limit it to the point that they can't get these no-knock warrants, you're putting, some mother's son right in front of a gun, and you basically just signed a death certificate, or someone's daughter. I think people have to be aware that those aren't given out recklessly.
Right.
They're given out after a judicial hearing.
Yeah.
And that they're only based upon necessity. So I couldn't abide by that. I also say too, the chokeholds, I mean, obviously I don't like the whole thought of chokeholding someone, nor would anybody, but in the instance where you have somebody who's armed, like with a knife, and they've got you, if you don't do a chokehold, you're probably going to get stabbed. These are the things the police have told us. There are extreme situations that they have to deal with, and I'm not going to handicap them so that they get hurt. So there were quite a few other little things, but those were the three major reasons I couldn't abide by it.
How do you feel about social workers going out on calls? It almost seems like it's flipping now.
Yeah, and it's certainly no disrespect to the profession of social work. That's what I have my undergraduate degree in. But I chose to do my senior year, my field practice in the Department for Children and Families in Rhode Island. And I was in an emergency response and assessment unit. So we would be there when things were not stable. In fact, we didn't even keep files for more than a month. Generally. But when it was a really dangerous situation, I wasn't in any position that I could go into a potentially life-threatening environment, grab their child, and run. I just couldn't.
It seems like people that don't really know those situations and making the decisions, it makes me a little, as a citizen out there, a little nervous when I hear those solutions.
Yeah.
That's the end of part 1 with our representative, Sheila Harrington. Stay tuned for part 2, coming shortly to a social media outlet near you. Thank you.